Okay, so basically we want to go through the writings and the opinions of some of our Sephardic rabbis, mainly Syrian Halabi rabbis, but I'm also going to include the opinion of Hacham Ovadia Yosef, since he was the leader of the Sephardic world for many years. So the first rabbi I'm going to discuss is a rabbi known as Rabbi Ovadia Hadaya. Rabbi Ovadia Hadaya was born in Halab in 1890. His father was Hacham Shalom Hadaya. Hacham Shalom Hadaya was also born in Halab in 1862. I have an example of one of Hacham Shalom Hadaya's books right here. This is B'Dibir Shalom, a book of responsa. Hacham Shalom Hadaya wrote other books as well. He wrote a book called Seile Bet Avot on Pirkei Avot, and he wrote many other books. He had two sons that were rabbis that we know about, Hacham Ezra Hadaya and Hacham Ovadia Hadaya. So the son that we're focusing on, his right, he's the one that wrote about Yom Haasmaut, is Hacham Ovadia Hadaya. So Hacham Ovadia Hadaya wrote an 8-volume responsa known as Yaskil Abdi. So he has many responsa in this series. He's widely quoted by Hacham Ovadia Yosef. He was actually 30 years older than Hacham Ovadia, so they lived in the same lifetime together. Hacham Ovadia Hadaya passed away in 1969, and Hacham Ovadia Yosef quotes Hacham Ovadia Hadaya very frequently in Yabia Omer. My rabbi, Rabbi Shimon Aluf Shahye, told me that it was Hacham Ovadia Hadaya's response on Yom Haasmaut, which had an influence on Hacham Ovadia Yosef's subsequent response in Yabia Omer, and we're going to touch also on Hacham Ovadia Yosef's response in Yabia Omer. So in Yaskil Abdi, Hacham Ovadia Hadaya brings out a few points. So Hacham Ovadia Hadaya, you have to understand that he was a mikubal. He was a master of Kabbalistic teachings, mystical teachings. So he would not be open to having Hallel recited during the prayers themselves, meaning not in its normal place like we recite the Hallel on Rosh Chodesh or any other holiday after Hazara. He would only consider Hallel after Aleinu L'Shabeach, so as not to have a hefsek, an interruption in the prayers. So that was the first thing he said. Well, actually, the first thing he said was not to recite Hallel at night. That Hallel at night is reserved for the first 2 nights of Pesach. And then he said not to recite Hallel after the Hazara. But what about reciting Hallel after Aleinu L'Shabeach? So he brought several important points about the day. You have to understand he lived through all of the history, because he was born in 1890. He came to Eretz Yisrael at first at the age of 9 with his father. And he went back to Halab for a short period of time during World War I. But then when he came back in 1918, he basically lived the rest of his life in Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. So he lived through all of the history. And in his Teshuvah, he made the following points. So he says, the military victory was miraculous. The new state was surrounded by enemies, greatly outnumbered. The enemies had much more weapons, much more ammunition. Israel didn't have enough soldiers. They didn't have enough weapons. They didn't have enough supplies. And therefore, he points out that it was only the mercy of Hashem that enabled this new state to survive. So that in itself was a miracle. The second point that he brings out is that the victory meant that Israel would be open to Jews from all over the world, whereas before, oppressed Jews seeking refuge in Israel were turned away. Now Jews could come to the land of their forefathers under Jewish rule, and hundreds of thousands had returned, which is the greatest return of Jews to the land of Israel since the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. According to Hacham Ovadia Hadaya, was a clear sign that this was the beginning of the final redemption, what he calls the Athalta de Geulah. So that was his second point. He had a third point, and that's that the establishment of the state of Israel brought honor and respect to Jews all over the world and created the opportunity for every Jew who wishes to move to the land of Israel. Now he brought up a fourth point, and he says that in the war of 1948, many Arabs fled the country of their own accord, making it possible to settle new Jewish immigrants as well. as Jews that were displaced by the Jordanians during the course of the war. So he looks at all of these events, especially all of them together, as a monumental miracle for the Jewish people. But he still didn't want to recite Hallel the Beracha, because he said the state still remained threatened by the Arabs. And at that time of the writing of the Teshuvah was before 1967. So he noted that the old city and the Kotel were not under Jewish control. But he did say that by reciting even the half Hallel, the teaching of Kol HaModeh B'Niso, anybody who gives thanks and gratitude for his miracle, because he gave thanks for the miracles that occurred to him, he will merit another miracle. And he said this would apply to our situation and would help us merit the final redemption. So it means that we cannot just ignore the miraculous events that he enumerated. We must thank Hashem for these miracles, and that can and will bring us to the times of Mashiach. Similarly, our Chief Rabbi Hakam Yaakov Kassin, and I forgot to mention in the beginning that Hakam Ovadia Hadaya was Hakam Yaakov Kassin's brother-in-law. Hakam Yaakov Kassin was married to the daughter of Hakam Shalom Hadaya, meaning the sister of Hakam Ovadia Hadaya. And Hakam Yaakov Kassin, our first Chief Rabbi, like his brother-in-law Hakam Ovadia Hadaya, also instituted the recitation of Hallel on Yom Haasmaut in our community. And that practice was perpetuated by Hakam Baruch ben Hayim alav Shalom to say Hishem and half Hallel after Hallel l'Shabeach. I have a copy here of a letter that Hakam Yaakov Kassin issued to the community in 1987, reiterating his position. So I just want to read the main points of the letter. He says, our community has celebrated Israel Independence Day by reciting the partial Hallel on that day and not reciting Vidui, no supplications, no Anna. He says, in this way, we thank and acknowledge the Almighty for his miracles and wonders, which we in our generation were fortunate to witness, the beginning of the period of the redemption. This is very similar to what was written by his brother-in-law, of the people of Israel. And he noted that Israel's Ministry of Religion has proclaimed that we follow this custom, which has been approved by Israeli rabbinate, the chief rabbis. And therefore, again, in 1987, he called upon all congregations in yeshivot to follow in our minhag for the sake of peace and unity. So this was definitely the position of our rabbis, Hakam Yaakov Kassin, Hakam Baruch ben Hayim, Alav Shalom, Hakam Abdul Babadi, Alav Shalom, that we recognize the day, we don't have tahanunim for that day, and we recite the half Hallel. Did we recite it after Hallel l'Shabeach? Did we recite it in its place? I know it was the opinion of Hakam Baruch alav Shalom to recite it after Hallel l'Shabeach. Motav alav Shalom insisted that Hakam Yaakov wanted it recited in its proper place, and I know in Shad Tzion, some minyanim say it in one place, some say it in another place. Hakam Yosef addresses that question in his Teshuvah Yabia Omer. If the congregation wants to say the Hallel in its proper place after Hazara, as instead of Hallel l'Shabeach, can they? So in his Teshuvah, he's clearly opposed to reciting Hallel with a beracha, but he does approve of half Hallel without a beracha. So he writes that according to the Mekubalim, it should be said after Hallel l'Shabeach. But according to him, if a congregation wants to say the Hallel in its usual place, after the Hazara, they may do so. Since he points out, we are not Mekubalim. Our congregations, the average person, is not knowledgeable in Kabbalah. Doesn't practice all of the practices that are taught by the Mekubalim. And therefore, we're not necessarily obligated to adhere to all the requirements of the Mekubalim. So, in addition to the military victory, Hakam Yosef also mentioned that many leading rabbis look at the establishment of the state of Israel as the beginning of the final redemption, and that we are also celebrating the emergence of the state of Israel as the Torah center of the entire world. where tens of thousands of students are studying in yeshivot. So the Torah, as the way he describes it, the Torah returned to her original home, to Yerushalayim, and there is no Torah study like the Torah study of the land of Israel. And similarly, the people living in Israel are becoming more attentive to learning Torah from the great rabbis that are living there. So these are some of the points that Hakam Yosef pointed out. Some of them are similar to Hakam Hadaya. Some of them were not pointed out by Hakam Hadaya. We also have the writings of Hakam Yitzhak Shehebar, Alav Shalom. He was born and educated in Halab, and he went on to be the Chief Rabbi of Argentina. And we have a book from him here. The book is known as Yitzhak Chera A. So Yitzhak Chera A is a collection of letters which Hakam Yitzhak Shehebar wrote on matters of halakha and minhagim. There's his correspondence with many great rabbis. He wrote regarding that in his opinion, that those that are against celebrating Yom Haasmaut, in his opinion, they're mistaken, especially because of the increased Jewish population in the land of Israel since the establishment of the state, meaning the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, Jewish settlement in the land. And he also wrote that in spite of all the spiritual deficiencies that one might be disturbed by in modern Israel, they are not worse than the wicked kings from the biblical era, like the kings Ahab and Omri, that Eliyahu Nabi ran to them and treated them with respect because they were royalty. And our rabbis point out, and they taught, that they merited being royalty for establishing one city in the land of Israel. So Rabbi Shehebar taught that all the more so, the Zionist establishment that built many cities and villages all throughout the land of Israel and saved thousands of Jewish lives from desperate situations and brought them to the Holy Land of Israel and provided them with housing, whether it was 100,000 Jews from Iraq or Yemen or other lands. And before the establishment of the state, Jews were refused entry to Palestine by the British, even those ships that were fleeing Nazi Germany. Rabbi Shehebar also states that the establishment of the state of Israel has prevented many anti-Semitic campaigns against Jews all over the world. As prior to the establishment of the state, Jews were attacked on an ongoing basis. So saving Jewish lives and building up Jewish settlement in the land of Israel alone is enough to earn our respect. Add to that the establishment of hundreds of yeshivot that did not exist before the establishment of the state of Israel and could not exist without the establishment of the state of Israel. So all of these are points that are brought out by Hakam Yitzhak Shehebar. And lastly, Rabbi Shehebar points out that even great prophets were punished for speaking badly about the Jewish people. He points to Yeshayahu HaNavi, one of our great Nevi'im, who was punished for saying that he was sitting among a nation of impure lips. But as she explained, that this was something that Yeshaya said on his own. This was not something commanded by Hashem as part of his rebuke. So the Pasuk following that statement said that an angel came and burned his lips with a hot coal. And the rabbis explained that this is why he was murdered by the king Menashe. So we see that he got a punishment in the Pasuk with the hot coal burning his lips for saying that the lips of the Jewish people were impure. And the rabbis attributed his murder by Menashe as the final atonement for that sin. Furthermore, Moshe Rabbeinu was punished, according to our rabbis, for saying that the Jewish people won't believe him. They said, "V'hen lo ya'aminu bi," right? They're not going to believe me when I come to talk to them. And when he went, they did believe him. And the rabbis taught that eventually Moshe Rabbeinu was punished for his sin, and Hashem described it as Ya'an lo he'emantim bi, because of your lack of faith. So they say that it's a midah keneged midah for Moshe, suspecting that the Jews wouldn't believe him, that in the end, he ended up getting punished for a sin which was described as lack of belief. And even angels were rebuked by Hashem when they complained about sins committed by the Jewish people. Like the Pasuk in Zechariah says, Yig'ar Adonai Becha Satan. There's also Pisukim with Eliyahu HaNabi, where he complained he was being too critical of the Jewish people, even though they were immersed in idol worship at that time. And when Eliyahu complained too much, Hashem replaced him with Elisha HaNavi. Right? So Rabbi Shehebar says that even great Nibi'im, even the angels themselves were rebuked for criticizing Am Yisrael. So we should be very careful before we speak. Our job is to focus on the positive and, of course, work towards spiritual improvement going forward. Interestingly, regarding two of the chapters of Tehillim that are part of the Hallel, namely chapters Kof Yod Zayin and Kof Yod Het, chapters that begin with Hallelu Adonai Kol Goyim Shabihu Kol Ha'omim and Hodu Adonai Ki Tov Ki Olam Hasto, and that continue with Min HaMetzar Karati Yah. So regarding these chapters, Hakam Yom Tov Yedid writes in his commentary to Tehillim, his commentary is known as Me'ir Tov. You've probably seen this in our Batei Knesset. So according to him, he writes in this commentary that these chapters are talking about our days and the wars with the Arab countries against Israel. And that none of the world leaders or the nations around the world at that time believed that the Jews could be successful militarily against their enemies. And that they believed that the Jews lacked the courage and the ability to have their own state, especially because they were outnumbered and surrounded by their enemies. And therefore, when they succeeded and won the war and established a state, it became clear that Hashem had helped them against all odds with their miraculous victory. And you could look at various Pisukim in HaMetzar Karatiyah, right? From the narrow straits we call to Hashem. In the 6-Day War, before the 6-Day War, Israel was 9 miles wide at its narrowest point. The Pasuk ends, Anani b'merhabya. Hashem answered me with great width, meaning after the 6-Day War, the country was 3 times the size. Sabuni, Gam Sibabuni, they surrounded me. You had Syria from the north, Egypt from the south, and Jordan in the east with Iraq backing them up, right? They tried to knock us down, but Hashem helped us. All these Pisukim, Yasuri Seraniya, we were being afflicted. They were already digging graves prior to the 6-Day War. But in the end, Hashem did not put us to death. The estimates were to have much greater losses, and they were much less. So part of the Hallel was actually composed 3,000 years in advance for Yom Haasmaut and Yom Yerushalayim, according to our own Hakam Yom Tov Yedid. So according to him, there would be no question, should we recite the Hallel on Yom Haasmaut? Should we recite the Hallel on Yom Yerushalayim? It was part of the chapters were composed for that day. So we see from Hakam Yahadaya, and Hakam Yosef, and Hakam Yaakov Kassin, and Hakam Yitzhak Shehebar, also from Hakam Yom Tov Yedid, that we have a lot to be thankful for, and that we should celebrate the day with Hallel, and we should have a positive attitude. And while we're saying Hallel, we should also pay attention to the verses that are fitting for the occasion, as pointed out to us by Hakam Yom Tov Yedid. There's a few other points that I wanted to bring out in our discussion, and I'm just checking the time. Okay, so one of the points is the population growth that we spoke about, and how that's part of the miracle. Just looking at some of the statistics, in 1800, world Jewry was estimated at 2.5 million all over the world, with only 7,000 Jews living in Eretz Yisrael at the time, less than 0.3%. In 1890, you fast forward to the beginning of the Zionist movement. At that point, world Jewry grew to 9 million, and there were 43,000 Jews living in Israel, still half of 1%. When we get fast forward to 1947, the eve of the establishment of the state of Israel, world Jewry was estimated at 11 million, and there were 630,000 Jews living in Israel, a little over 5%. Today, world Jewry is estimated at 14.7 million, with 6.7 million Jews living in Eretz Yisrael, over 45%. So this is the kibbutz galuyot that we're praying for 3 times daily for thousands of years. We're seeing it unfold gradually before our eyes. So in fact, when I first compiled the numbers, it was 5 years ago, and at that time, the Jews living in Israel were 6.25 million. So we see a growth in 5 years of approximately 500,000. So we're probably going to see within our lifetimes the majority of Jewish people living in Eretz Yisrael. We're very close, and we're getting closer. Before I conclude, I just want to refer to something very interesting that we find in Maran and Shulchan Aruch. So as you know, Shulchan Aruch is a book of laws, practical halakha. And Maran has a siman in Shulchan Aruch about the establishment of the holidays in our times with the fixed calendar. But then he adds this halakha, which really isn't a halakha at all. It's more of a remez, a hint or an allusion. And the halakha goes like this: Siman l'kiriyat mu'adim at bash kar tak hatz waf. What does that mean? There's a, when you talk about different types of remazim, like numerical values, there's also a system called atbash. So atbash is that the first letter of the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, aleph, corresponds to the last letter, taf. And the second letter, bet, corresponds to the second last letter, shin. And so on and so forth, gimel, teresh. So dalet, tzadi. So he says, if you take the days of Pesach, so you'll see how each day of Pesach corresponds based on this system of atbash to all the different holidays that we have throughout the year. So aleph is taf. So whatever day, the first day of Pesach is that year, going to correspond to a holiday that starts with taf, Tisha B'Av. So for instance, this year, the first day of Pesach was Thursday. In the summertime, when we celebrate Tisha B'Av this year, it's going to be on a Thursday. It always works that way. Bash, the second day of Pesach, always corresponds to the first day of Shavuot. Shin, Shavuot, Bash. So if to this year, Friday was the second day of Pesach, so the first day of Shavuot will be on Friday. Gimel is the third day of Pesach, was on Shabbat, corresponds with Rish, Rosh Hashanah. The first day of Rosh Hashanah will be on Shabbat this year. Hatz is the fifth day of Pesach. Dak, the fourth day of Pesach was on Sunday. It corresponds to Kriyat Torah. Simchat Torah will be on Sunday this year. The fifth day of Pesach, Monday, comes with Tzadi Tzom Kippur. So Kippur this year will be on Monday. Then he concludes with Waf, the sixth day of Pesach, so it was Tuesday. So it corresponds with Pe Purim for the previous year. So this year we had Purim on Tuesday. And then he leaves it there. So we all know that there's 7 days of Pesach. He doesn't have anything for the seventh day. Based on this system, Zayin would correspond with Ayin. Ayin is, of course, what we have in our times, Atzmaut. And the seventh day of Pesach always corresponds with Yom Haasmaut. So this year, Shvi'i Shel Pesach was on Wednesday. And of course, this Wednesday, we're celebrating Hag Haasmaut. So we have a remez from Maran and Shulchan Aruch, meaning first of all, it's curious that he even put the law in Shulchan Aruch all together because it's not a law, it's just remazim. And then the remez is incomplete. We know there's 7 days of Pesach and he ends it with 6. And it comes out that in our times, the remez was completed with the establishment of Yom Haasmaut on Hei Iyar. So this is just a very nice remez to bring home the importance of the day and the significance of the actual day, Hei Iyar. Do we have any questions? I don't know if anybody's unmuted, but let's see. Does anybody want to ask questions about what we discussed? Okay, so if there's no questions, I just want to encourage you all that in 5 minutes from now, My good friend Joey Mosseri is also giving talk about other Sephardic rabbis, the ones that I did not cover in this class, so it would be a good follow-up to it. Just want to wish
she's giving
everybody,
a class now.
I want to wish everybody a good Hag Hasalamut and Bezat Hashem Nizkeh Nireh B'Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Mehera B'Yameinu.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Going to-
Chag Habaruch, Mark.